All right, welcome, welcome. So, for those of you who don't know me and are just tuning in for the first time, I'm Yorona Boster. I'm a certified speaker and communications coach, life coach, speaker, author, podcaster, all of these things where I live and breathe at the intersection of communication and healthy, balanced leadership, helping people communicate with purpose and integrity, both with themselves and with all those around them. So, before our guest introduces himself, I have a request for anyone listening or watching today. As this series continues, and I mean this truly and sincerely, would like your input for communication topics that interest you, because communication runs so much deeper than we think, which means I don't want you to be afraid to stretch the limits of where and how communication shapes your life. And when you think about that, then you have the opportunity to say, this is something that not a lot of people I see are talking about. And then drop me a message, send a DM to me, put it in the comments, or even email them to me at yorona@yoronaboster.com. All right, Eric, would you tell our audience a bit about yourself before we jump into our conversation today?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, it is a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited for this conversation. Every time you and I get to chatting, it goes into these avenues that I was not expecting. So, really excited for that. So, thanks for having me. But yes, my name is Eric Ayers, and I am a nurse by background. I've been a nurse for over a couple decades. And during my nursing career, I was the burned out nurse. And that led me on this beautiful self exploration journey of finding who I truly am, what my purpose really is, and realigning with that. And once that even began, and I'm not saying that I'm fully aligned with who I am, but when the journey to that started, everything shifted. And my purpose continues to be revealed. And in that, I was introduced to innovation and simulation, and it gave me words and verbiage to how my mind thinks. And then I could communicate that onto others way better than, hey, let's just do this because it's cool. Um, so I pivoted in healthcare into innovation and simulation, and then continued into asking questions like, how do we embed learning into our everyday activities? Instead of learning being a singular event in a classroom, how do we pivot? And so then I became a coach. So life leadership coach. I do some coaching at University of Tennessee in our graduate program with our MBA program. And then I also am an adjunct lecturer in organizational behavior. Because during this process, I found out that I am very fascinated with human behavior. And more importantly, when we get a group of humans together behaving in their own individual ways, what does that create? And to me, I see this as adult-sized toddlers, and I mean zero disrespect from that. It's simply a playground in which we navigate through. And so ultimately, the questions come up of how do we improve efficiency and effectiveness and use this genius, this toddler genius that we all have in us as we interact and build one another. And ultimately, this is Ubuntu. This is I am because we are. And that is the philosophy that I can feel that energy just by saying it. It's the energy of I am because of the amazing interactions and the amazing people, and even what I thought at the time, the horrible people, right? I'm a product of those situations and those people. And then the other question, how do we build humans to where these humans can care for other humans more effectively, more compassionately, and become resources? So long-winded answer, but
I love
that's
it.
me in
I
a
love
nutshell.
it. I love it. You're human, and that's the thing. Something I recently said to a client of mine who was really having that existential crisis of self. And I said, here's the reality. It's quite simple, but very profound. You exist, therefore you matter.
Mm.
It's really simple. The fact of your existence matters, because I don't think people even know statistically how unique it is to exist as a human being.
Yes.
They don't realize it's not so easy. You know, for some people, it seems rather easy. Oh, I'm just having kids. I'm having kids. You know, but when you actually realize what it takes to become a human, it's actually a lot more rare than we think it is. And
Yeah.
so the fact of your existence simply means you matter, and we can go from there, but you've got to get comfortable with that expression of understanding your existence means something. What it means, maybe you haven't yet determined that. How you utilize that meaning and how you find your purpose, you know, maybe you haven't figured that out yet, but that's okay. That's
Yes.
not the point. The point is you're here, and that's what matters. So
Absolutely.
very profound stuff that we're already starting off with. And I wanted to jump into our conversation today because I see it so often these days. And I want to say a lot of people feel pulled in two directions, but that's not even true. A lot of people feel pulled in endless multitudes of directions these days. You know, they know maybe they know the kind of person or the kind of leader that they want to be, but then pressure hits. And when that happens, they don't always show up the way they actually intend to show up, right? Their intention doesn't always manifest in their actions and their behaviors.
Right.
And so in a time where that we are right now, where everything feels excessively loud and extremely reactive, what I want to know is what actually helps people close the gap between that intention and the behavior of how they show up, so that they can communicate in a way that feels steady, feels honest, and feels very human. So that is the question. And I know we're just jumping right into the deep end here. What
What I
is your
like.
initial thought process on that question?
So my initial thought is this is the biology of how every human being works. This is the way we work, and for some reason, we tend to not. Let me rephrase that. We tend to create systems that don't take that into account.
Okay.
And so instead, why don't we design the systems to keep this in mind? And so we'll unpack that in a little bit. But honestly, a good friend of mine, Brian Muka, always says, or he says a lot, breathing is going to be a thing one day. That's what I hear. Right. And he says it jokingly, but it's true. Because what you described is ultimately this amygdala hijack. This, when we're being pulled every which way, no matter how much we want to believe that we're going to rise to this occasion, we cannot do that because the way our biology is set up, we drop to our highest level of preparation. And that's a difference because as we're being pulled, we get this chemical cocktail cascade of because our body has no idea if we're just stressed out on this presentation that we're going to do or if we're being chased through the woods by this bear. It doesn't know the difference. Right. But it's going to give us the same chemicals needed to withstand, outrun, or outfight whatever it is, right? So when this happens, we actually lose analytical abilities because our mind is shutting these doors. And our amygdala is hijacking our system. And you brought it up, this dysregulated nervous system. And that's ultimately what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we find ourselves in this situation, the best thing to do that I have found and that I have researched and that others have found that I've talked to, and it sounds so cliche until you actually try it, is breathing. Is literally taking a moment and recognizing, wait a minute, there's chaos, but there's a scripture coming to mind that Elijah was being chased and he gets to this cliff and he's looking out and he hears thunder, he sees lightning, he sees fire, there's earthquakes, and he hears a small voice that says, I'm not there. And to me, this is a representation of us being in this chaos, and our inner voice, the God within, is saying, I'm not in the chaos, so go within. And it's breathing. And if we breathe for just a minute, these chemicals, they only last for a minute. So anything longer than a minute, our mind is actually re-triggering the cascade effect, and we're habitually patterning this fight or flight. So by breathing, we biohack into saying, wait a minute, there's not a bear chasing me because I cannot breathe this way if a bear is chasing me. So is there danger? No, there's not danger. And it's simply breathing and allowing those chemicals to absorb, and then they're gone. And then we have the analytical ability to do what we are attempting to do. So whole lot of information for step one.
Well, I think, and this is really important for people to understand, and that sometimes we think it's a character flaw of ourselves. Why am I so reactive? Sometimes we get this thought process that it's a personality flaw. It's, it's something wrong with me that I'm super reactive. What we need to understand is that it's a biological process, and it becomes a communication load issue. It becomes we've just stopped communicating with ourselves.
Yes.
Right. So because we haven't found the internal clarity, and taking that breath gives us a way back to the clarity process. It gives us a new road back to there. And now what's so interesting to me, because of the field that I come from, is watching this with children, because their prefrontal lobe hasn't fully developed yet. So that clarity process isn't even fully developed. So how do they do it? Well, a lot of it takes practice. It takes doing the thing a lot of times before you believe the thing. And I have recently noticed that that's true of adults too. Some adults will be like, oh, I've been breathing. But I don't want to say this, and I'm not I don't want to sound condescending here, but you don't believe it's going to work. And if you don't believe it's going to work, then it will not work for you.
Yes.
If you're like, oh, fine, it didn't work. Well, yeah. Right. No, really. Right. You have to actually believe in the science that proves that it does work, because what you're doing is you're triggering the oldest part of our brainstem. The parasympathetic nervous response system is way older than everything else. Like our brainstem is oh gosh. And I had this my last guest was talking about this. What is it? 500,000 years old or something like that. And then even like our amygdala is like 400 or 300,000 years old, and our prefrontal cortex is only 60,000 years old. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the age difference, there's a huge gap in the accessibility, right? Our brains are wired so that they're way tapped into our fight or flight response. They're way tapped into our threat analysis response well before they're tapped into our critical thinking. But the more we understand what it is that our critical thinking can actually do for us, that when we take that parasympathetic nervous system and calm the fire within, we can retrieve that which we know to be true. But it's hard for a lot of people.
It is hard.
So again, how does that gap get closed? Is it simply through knowledge, or is it through something more than knowledge?
One of my favorite quotes that I kind of condensed and created my own is, thoughts without action is simply hallucination. So if we have the idea and it stays an idea, all we're doing is hallucinating. So that's the same with knowledge. Like knowledge is only power if we utilize it. Otherwise, we're just gaining more inputs and we're becoming smarter and smarter, but we're not helping ourselves or humanity at all. It's just, then it becomes a crutch or something that we depend on in order to make ourselves, and I'm speaking from experience here, so
Yeah.
to make ourselves feel as though we are moving forward and all we're doing is running on a treadmill, ultimately.
Ooh, yes. And I
And
wanna bring that to the problem with information overwhelm these days. We have pushed all of ourselves into a state of massive levels of hypervigilance.
mhm,
Everybody feels like they need to be in the know all the time. So constantly scrolling the news, constantly oh, I need to know what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. But do you?
right,
Is the real question I ask.
right.
How will knowing that yet again another something law was passed here that doesn't agree with your viewpoints and values and things like that, like how does the knowing help you exist in your current state of being? How does it?
I don't know, because the Wayne Dyer quote of you find what you look for, and do you live in a hostile world, or a loving world? It's the same world. So to me, living in the excuse me, living in the know and having to know right now is feeding me with excuse me, my inner child is like wanting to speak right now. Um, is actually fueling the direction in which my emotion, my energy and motion is going to start traversing. So, because I'm going to find what I'm looking for. And if I'm consistently looking on social media, for example, for these inputs of what's going on in the world today, well, that's where my mind goes. And then it creates more avenues for me to follow this progression. And that's exactly what I'm going to find. It's just like if I'm looking to get a new car, whatever car is in my mind that I want to get, I see it everywhere. It's the
Right.
same day.
Mhm.
I'm seeing these
Yeah.
all the time, but now my mind is creating opportunities for me to pay attention to this.
To pay attention, to perceive that thing, that
Yes.
which you're looking for. If you're seeking something out, or if you feel like something is missing in your life, because you've determined that it's something that you need, so whether that's information, whatever it might be, you're going to see you're gonna see it everywhere. And how you perceive it, though, changes the nature of the way you see it.
Yes, it does.
So, for instance, when I was struggling with infertility, it felt like everywhere I looked, there was a pregnant woman or somebody with, young children or babies, everywhere I looked, and it hurt so much
Right.
because I let it hurt, because I let myself feel less than in comparison, because as relational creatures that we are, we see everything that's in our world in comparison to that which is out in our external
Mhm.
world. But how we choose to compare it makes the difference for how we perceive it.
Mhm.
So if we see that and we're like, "Oh, I'm so happy for those people that that they're carrying on with family building and things like that." It changes the nature of the way we see it. And maybe we can see it as a gift. Maybe we can see it completely differently. Uh, it's it just brings me to a place of the fact that sometimes we are the determiners of how hard the path is that we struggle on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our perception. And that's something that we cover in organizational behavior is our perceived reality. We if there's an organization with 2,000 people working in that company, they all work in the same reality of this company, but they all have their own perceived realities of day-to-day operations, of minute-to-minute operations, of family and balance, all these intricate aspects. And so to your point, yes, some people see this as you know, a great way to compare to someone else to say, that is awesome. I'm so glad for them. And if they can do it, I can do it. And I'm going to follow their lead. And their perceived reality is now one of hope, of like momentum moving forward. Whereas someone else can say, I can't believe they got that promotion. Like that should have been me. And all of a sudden it
Mm.
shifts. And
Yep.
and these feed our energy and motion, our emotion moving forward. And that
Yeah.
creates a totally different avenue. And to your point earlier, because what you're bringing up and what you're asking, I love focusing on cognitive and emotional dissonance of, you know, either what we think and how we're showing up, or what we're expected to feel and what we actually feel. That gap of, to me, that is where I found myself out of misalignment, or in misalignment, was
Yeah.
expecting to be one person but feeling something else, and then finally realizing this huge, Grand Canyon sized gap. And then
Mm.
how do we bring it together? And the best analogy I can use for almost everything that I talk about is the bicycle. Because if I say I'm going to ride this bicycle and I never pick up the bicycle, I'm never going to ride this bicycle. And when I pick it
Right.
up the first time, I am still not going to be able to ride this bicycle. I'm going to fall.
Right.
It's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
And then the more I do this, the more I'm going to learn. And eventually I ride this bicycle. So recognizing I have to do something, to me, is first step into this. And then following that up with doing something, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
and I'm never going to find myself in a place that says, wait a minute, I'm misaligned here. I need to move forward. And now everything that I do is going to be in total alignment. No, because I have these
Right.
habitual patterns that
Right.
are going to bring me right back, because it's trying to keep me safe. That's
Yes.
what the habitual patterns are for. We live in a body that, thank God, automates our system.
Mhm.
So we don't have to think about the million bits per second that are going on. We just think about, what kind of
Right.
coffee do I want? Right? Not the,
Right.
how do I beat my heart? How do I do blood exchange? How do I, and the other thoughts going on. So ultimately, we continue to go back to this place of gratitude for, oh yeah, thanks for letting me know that I still haven't overcome this, and
Mhm.
self-forgiveness of,
Yeah.
instead of, I can't believe I haven't beat this habit, or I cannot believe
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not doing what I need to do. It's okay. This is a process. This is, I still have
Yes.
my training wheels on, so I don't fall.
Mhm.
Um, but I keep doing this, and then I can take the training wheels off, and then I can start pedaling on my own, and it's a progression. And then one day, there's no more thinking to it, because it's part of the automated system that we created. And then now we're on to the next part of, okay, now how else do I grow here? What else do I need to learn? How can I be
Right.
a better leader? What communication tools? Um, cool. Maybe I need to stop talking and listen more, right?
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
take that cue. So,
Oh, no, I love where you're going with it, because it also, you struck on a really important point. From it, it's behaviors that we need to change. It's the external behaviors that we do, but we have to help people understand that you've already crafted a lot of behavioral patterns that require undoing.
mhm,
So for leaders, because they feel this pressure, the gap tends to be there because they say, well, I want to be over here. Can't I just take a shortcut and make a leap? The reality is that's not the way human development
mhm,
works. The reality is that human development takes time. It's not about speed. It's not about how fast can I get there. It's
right.
about how can I get there most effectively so I don't revert back. I
Mhm,
think that's something that I do want to expand on here, because one of the things I see a lot of leaders wanting to do is take shortcuts. The problem with shortcuts is that they will always cut you back to the beginning.
great point.
And so it's not about shortcuts. It's about, how do I create something that has long-term sustainability for me so that I become the leader that I want to see. I want to become that leader over here. To close the gap requires little behavioral steps and a very specific process of understanding that, oh, I accidentally took a step backwards. Now I need to take another step forward.
Yeah.
It's really, it's the age old adage of two steps forward, one step back. But if we stop beating ourselves up for the fact that it takes that long.
Right.
I think that's where a lot of people get caught in the perfectionist trap. A
Mhm.
lot of leaders will be people who have a tendency to be hardest on themselves first. But when we're hardest on ourselves first, we end up being the example we don't want to see, because we
Absolutely.
see in our
Yep.
people, oh my God, why are they so hard on themselves? They just made a mistake. Because we're a lot more compassionate. We tend to be a lot more compassionate for other people's mistakes.
Yes.
Not all leaders. Some leaders want people to be just as hard on themselves as they are on themselves. But that's not the most efficient and effective way to actually keep people appreciative of your leadership and consistently showing up under your leadership.
Absolutely.
What you will get are people who burn out. You will get constant rollovers. So let's talk about this in terms of the medical field,
Yeah.
and even in terms of in the education system. The constant exodus, and then quick entry, quick running away,
Yep.
and the cycle is getting worse and worse. It's getting faster and faster,
Yes.
because people are expecting something that's not the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is that everything takes time to build,
Mhm.
and takes time to have it takes time to build loyalty. It takes time to build trust. It takes time to build consistency. It takes time to build efficiency. And I know that doesn't sound efficient for a lot of people, but that's the reality. So
Right.
it's not, we don't rise to our values, we fall to our systems. So if a
Absolutely.
system has been created that expects speed, 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 like get up, get with this, fast, fast, fast. I want you to turn over fast. We are going to keep falling to the system that we designed at speed instead of effectiveness.
Absolutely. There's like 3 different chunks within this that are absolutely huge. And one thing that I say is, as individuals, when we're in this amygdala hijack, we, as I said before, we do not rise to the occasion, but we lower ourselves to the highest preparation, that highest level of preparation. Well, as an organization, as we all come together, unfortunately, the organization cannot rise to their mission.
Right.
Instead, they drop to their regulation. Well, of course they do, because
Mhm.
regulations are built around safety. And if we have a bunch of individuals that are focused on keeping themselves safe, and I need safety, and I'm in fight or flight, and safety, 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 because they're thinking I'm not safe, then of course, as an organization, it's going to focus on safety. It has to.
Right.
That's the way that the organizational nervous system is built, right? So that's one. The other thing, and if we as a nation, as a world, took what I'm about to say and actually thought about it and put it into application as adults, I think we could eliminate at least half of our world issues. If I would bet that everyone on here has seen a toddler begin their journey of learning to walk, right? It's it's clumsy, it's like funny, but when they take that first step and then they fall, they tend to look at the adult or the person in the room. And I have yet to meet anyone who has demoralized, discredited, or put this child down for falling. Everyone I see is like, oh my gosh, you took your first step. This is amazing. Go. And I honestly believe it's because of that the child takes the next step,
Yeah.
because they feel empowered to stand up and try it again.
Yes.
And they keep going, and they keep being cheered on until
Yeah.
finally they're running, and then the adult has a different problem, right? The parent has a different problem of keeping up with them, right? Different
Yeah.
problem. But when does that stop? In our journey from childhood up to adulthood into the workforce, because that's a style of leadership.
Yeah.
That is allowing this person the environment to explore, to fail, to figure this out on their own, while also being supported by the people around to say, I'm here to help you if you need it, but you don't need it. You got this. Right. And We're
Right.
not watching to critique. We're watching because we're excited with you.
Right.
If we could create leadership
Mm-hmm.
with that idea of there's expectations you have to do. So yes, this is the check boxes of everything that you have to do. But
Right.
beyond that, I'm here to help you grow. That's part of what I do as a leader is I'm helping you grow. And if I'm not allowing you to expand, explore, and to fail, then
Yeah.
I'm actually failing at my job. And I think that
Yeah.
is a core piece that is missing. And
Yes.
in healthcare, we're focused on policies and because we have patients' lives at stake, right?
Right.
But I've yet to meet a nurse who doesn't understand the value of the human in front of them to where they will hold that and
Yeah.
own that and enroll themselves into this. And we don't have to be so policy and regulatory driven. We can actually be
Mhm.
human driven and
Yeah.
shift everything. And I'm curious. I would love to do an experiment to say what happens if like one hospital, one unit just
Right.
shifts their leadership
It's shifted.
style into this model as opposed to what does
Right.
QI look like today?
Yeah.
And QI leads to lag measures, which are things already done that we're still propelling in that area forward. And so what if we switch to
Yeah.
lead measures to where, oh, we identified something, let's change it right now and let's see what happens right now in the
Yeah.
direction that we're going. So all these little questions,
Hmm.
because we've just created habitual patterns. And it's like, just like you said, you know, that part of the brainstem, the
Ah.
parasympathetic nervous system
Yep.
knows what to do. It's older. What if we went back to that and allowed
Mhm.
it to do what it's supposed to do? Just like, what if we went back to treating this person like the genius toddler that's still inside of them and they know how to
Mm.
walk? We're just going to help them walk. And that
Yeah.
walking could be a new skill, a new task, a new level in the hierarchical system that they're wanting to move up into, or a new um they want to write a paper, they want to write a book. Cool, this is not part of your job, but this is part of who you are. And if I help you become part of who you are, you're actually going to help me and the team and the
Right.
organization, because
Right.
there is no work life. There's
Right.
you, and you interact in both of
Right.
those.
Exact I look at the everybody talks about work-life balance. I honestly I don't see it that way. I see that in life, we are who we are in our core essence, and then we take on different roles. That's it. We just take on, here's a role I'm taking on in this moment. In this moment, I'm, an interviewer, communicator, collaborator with you. In this moment, I'm a spouse and a partner. In this moment, I'm a mom. In this moment, I'm a sister. In this moment, I'm a friend. In this moment, I'm, a coach. In this moment, so it's really about the roles we shift into
Mhm.
and out of at each moment. But it's interesting because what you're saying to me makes me think about the fact that people need permission to be human before they can be effective.
Yes.
Because being human is owning our moments, our discomfort in the growth process. When I talk about the growth process, and so many people are scared of it. They again, because as humans and our brain is designed to stay in the safety zones of what's the known
Mhm.
quantities. So when something new is being input, there's a lot of discomfort there because, gosh, this is something new. I don't know everything I need to know about this, which means we move back into that place of threat analysis. I don't know the threat yet. So I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to run away from that. So that's discomfort.
Right.
But if we could lean into that with more curiosity and an opportunity of saying, hey, what can I learn if I stick with this? What could I possibly learn here? Curiosity is actually the thing that motivates us as humans from the earliest age.
Mhm.
The whole reason we are a motor species, a physically momentous species, is because that gives us the ability to explore our environment.
Mhm.
We start our journey of exploration, even though even before we can motorize, we start by checking in with our senses. What
Right.
do I see? What can I smell? What can I hear? What can I taste? What can I touch? And it starts there. And then as soon as we have movement, we move. right?
Right.
Unless
Right.
unless we have a specific a disability or a developmental delay, we move. We go right into movement, and that's because we're an exploratory creature. But at some point, we got told, we learned that movement could hurt us.
Mhm.
And so we then become relational in, as you said, how is the person that's there with us responding in the moment we get hurt? So
Mhm.
I fall down, I go boom. As an infant, I just took my first couple steps or ran
Yeah.
and then bloop. How does that person respond?
Right.
And so if you're a leader and you see one of your subordinates or one of the people you're leading your team who is faltering, how you respond to their falter determines whether they choose to falter again.
Mhm.
Because the likelihood of them faltering again is actually less likely if they choose to take that path again. More likely they are going to be more secure the next time they take that step. So let's put your expertise into effect, right? The first time, and I'm going to go back to my time when I was a veterinary technician.
Yeah.
The very first time I ever tried to take blood from an animal, do a blood draw from an animal,
Yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh, where's the baby? It took forever. And let me tell you, animals are not nearly as patient as humans, and humans don't have a whole lot of patience either. So, but if I had had somebody who was like, gosh, you did that all wrong. What
Mhm.
were you thinking? Why would you do it that way? Da, 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 da. Well, then I'm not going to try again. I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't try that again, which means I can't grow from that. I can't learn from that. I can't get better at that. I
Right.
can't excel at that. So leaders, to close that gap between how they react in that moment and how they respond, they need to acknowledge that the person they're responding to, they are responsible for whether that person is going to take a step towards growth or a step towards retreat.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And from a leadership standpoint, this also creates dependence. And it's interesting to hear those in leadership roles. I'm wording that exactly the way I want to word it. Those in leadership roles to where they say, I have all these people, like, why don't they just do it themselves? Like they're depending on me. Well,
Hmm.
that was created. That was part of this dependence. And ultimately, that is the definition of power within organizations is a dependence of some sort, whether that is of information, like I'm the only one that has this information. So I have a sense of power, or I'm the only one that can do this skill. Okay, if that's the case, there's a power that was created there because there's a dependence, but eventually I'm going to get burned out because I don't want to be the only one to be able to do this. Everyone should be able to walk. I don't want to be the one walking around and getting things for people. Like I want you to walk. So exactly what you said. How do we shift that to where, no, I want you to learn this and I want you to feel empowered to become great at this. And if you do amazing from the first time that I see you do this, it means that this isn't the first time you've done this, right? Because you're lying to me if you tell me that you are, because like that's how we figure things out. That's how we do things. It's not that great the first time. That's why simulation is awesome, because we get all of the complete nonsense out of the way before we start actually putting this into application on people. So yeah, and here's the cool thing about this. When we do it correctly, there was a couple of times in my career where I saw this, and this was when it started shifting the way I see education. I saw a physician doing chest compressions on an 8-year-old, and in pediatric hospitals, we allow the parents to come in to the code rooms so they can be a part of it, and which brings up different conversation, and like that's a totally different emotional aspect. But they're in there, and the physician's doing chest compressions, which isn't typical for the physician to be doing this, but he was doing it in such a textbook way. And as he was doing it, he was providing emotional support to the family. He was answering questions, but he was still doing the life-saving skill. And
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. So that's what competence means. So
Yeah.
like that's what leader means is I no longer have to think about what I'm doing in front of me.
Right.
I can think about the person in front of me. And that becomes a new goal because I'm not trying to meet regulations. I am actually trying to make a human connection and to provide human support for someone at the worst time of their life. And I had an email a nurse manager sent me. I apparently started an IV on a special needs child, and it had nothing to do with this email had nothing to do with me starting the IV. It had everything to do with how I treated this child and how I brought this child into the actual situation and the procedure. And I had no idea. Like I was simply being, and that's key is when we're
Yeah.
being who we are, these things happen. And like that was the second time that I thought, okay, when I know this so well, I'm no longer like my mind isn't on here anymore. This is habitual pattern and I'm rinse and repeat. And I'm able to pour my heart into these people. And
Yeah.
that's what I signed up for. That's what we in healthcare signed up for.
Right.
But the regulatory system and the safety system doesn't allow us to go to that point as easily.
Yeah. That's very, it's, I feel that we are living in a moment where people are so terrified of getting something wrong.
Right.
But that fear is keeping us limited to a place, like you said, where safety is the only measure that matters. But we can grow so much more when we understand that it's not about being perfect at something. It's about learning how to repair quickly and honestly when you miss the mark.
Mhm.
When you make a mistake, not if, when you make a mistake. Because yes, you're right. You and if you've habituated certain patterns, you're less likely to make that mistake. And then give over to other places you can grow.
Mhm.
That's really important. And then you're probably going to miss the mark there. Maybe you say the wrong thing to the parent while you're doing the thing that you know how to do really well. So then they notice that, well, you did that really well, but you messed up over here. It's simply telling us, that's an opportunity for me to get better at that.
Right.
This is an opportunity for me to grow. I need to lean into the discomfort of this. I didn't do that piece as well as I could have. So let me grow on that because I already have this part established. So where can I start to grow? That's the learning that you talk
Mhm.
about. If you're in a constant state of seeking out where you can learn more, you have the ability to grow more.
Absolutely.
But we don't give that to people, so we push them back into the safe spaces of just do what you know how to do so far. That's
Yeah.
it. Just do that. But that doesn't allow any of us to connect with each other on a deeper level, to connect with patient care on a deeper level, to connect with the human in front of you on a deeper level. And then what you're doing is you may be doing everything clinically well, but you're not doing everything humanly well.
Mhm.
And I think, and that reminds me of when my mother had uh, her lobectomy, when she had cancer, and we decided, we didn't know what kind it was yet. They were going to biopsy, but they decided they were just going to take the lobe. It's a very small tumor at the time, and she had the surgery. She did really well through the surgery, and a few days later, my sister brought her home. And my mother was acting really strange. And my sister said, and she called me at work, and I said, call the doctor, call the surgeon. Surgeon was like, if you're worried, take her to the ER.
Right.
He was super dismissive, super dismissive. If you're worried, take her to the ER. I have no time for this kind of attitude. And that attitude could have killed my mother. But my sister was like, I'm still worried, and I'm not just going to be shut down by this guy, because the way he said it made it sound like I shouldn't be worried.
Yeah.
And I think that, and my sister called me back, and I said, well, call someone else. And luckily the surgeon's assistant called my sister back, and she started querying her. She was like, is she looking off to a particular direction? Can she raise both arms? She couldn't. Left side was not functioning. She was looking off to the left. So we thought she was having a stroke. In the end, it turned out, no, she had multiple brain metastases, and her cancer had went from stage 1A to stage 4 in the scope of a few breaths. But what happens when professionals look at it from a clinical thing of, I don't have time for this past my clinical expertise. What they're doing is they're shutting out the human capacity to be willing to connect with that human on the other side on a very human, visceral human level first. And they have to be willing to do that. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good of a job you did at your surgery, your patient still died.
Right.
Because you decided that you couldn't be bothered with this. You got to a place where you're like, yeah, I can't be bothered with with the peons of the people that I'm saving.
Right.
And that is really, really upsetting, because if we weren't advocates for our mother, if we didn't know how to speak up for ourselves, and I've seen this happen so often, where patients just take the doctor's word as godlike. And there were plenty of other situations that happened where, again, we were kind of shut down because the God complex in the medical system that's been bred in for so long needs to be dismantled. We need to shift to a much more human compassion first, clinical knowledge. Does your patient need to know exactly how you're sectioning? Do they need to know exactly how you're cutting and the sutures you're using and things like that? No, they don't need to know that. What they do need is for you to confront their humanity first. And I will always say that. And one thing, I try and I try to tell people who are advocating for their patient needs, don't demonize the doctor at the same time.
Right.
Don't demonize them, because you need them. They need, their career is based off of you, but you also need them.
Right.
You need them because they have the knowledge. You have the human. You're the product, really. And so you need to both humanize one another. You need to acknowledge your doctor's humanity, that they may be under stress and pressure as well. And so when you come at them, don't come at them accusatorily, come at them with is this something you could have possibly missed? Can we address X, Y, Z? I'm not feeling like you're addressing X, Y, Z, so I need to go to someone who will be willing to address X, Y, Z.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because both of those representations from the physician side and the patient and family side are both reactions from what we've been talking about. They're both reactions from fight or flight. It is very difficult to respond when we are in this fight, flight, or freeze, because everything's shut down, right? The things that allow us to do that are shut down. So before we react, identifying, I feel this surge going through, maybe I should pause for a second. Breathe that out, and then asking follow-up questions, specifically not against the person, because the person is just representing the system that has been designed, because this is an exact output, an outcome secondary to industrial revolutionary style education. It was created for factory workers to come out of school to already have, like, what is that? So 18 years of school, which is come to school, sit in class, take breaks, eat lunch, pay attention, listen, obey rules, go home, come back, do it again. Monday through Friday, this 9-to-5 job was created in this element, and education has then created this type of lack of human connection. And we get mad because we don't know how to talk to the physician, because the physician doesn't hear us. But we're both products of this equation, and we're so far out of the Industrial Revolution, but we're still doing everything exactly the same. I have on my board human design before organizational design. So design for the human before we design for the organization.
Yes.
And if we meet the human need, then we will start asking the right questions on how do we build the organization to support this, right? And then we start shifting because there's something about human connection. Like
Yeah.
it no matter what executive leaders want to think, it actually increases our ROI. We have less worry on customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and it's a happy, healthy environment. And just like our bodies, when our bodies are happy and healthy, they perform the way that we need them to do.
Right.
Not all the time, not 100%, but when they don't, they fix it. And I think that's the missing piece, is this ownership of I own my stuff. I own what I do. The person beside me owns what they do. And when we do this, I'm able to share my genius with them and they're able to share their genius with me. And as this starts happening, we start building one another because we all have this genius that just lives inside of us. A lot of us are waiting for permission to allow that genius to come out. And when it does, it becomes this playground of these adult toddlers interacting in a way that enhances and empowers and propels us like leaps and bounds beyond what our current constraints can do. Yeah. Long-winded.
No, I completely agree. And and as we wrap up here, I will say one last thing, because I think leaders really need to hear this. When they make mistakes, going back in and repairing that by owning the mistakes we make builds trust so much faster than a flawless performance. People don't, because like I said with the surgeon, he did a flawless performance. He did a beautiful job with the surgery. But note that that's not the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of that surgeon. The first thing that comes to my mind when I think of him is the fact that I wouldn't trust him as a human being. Because he didn't humanize to the situation. And he could have repaired that even in the aftermath. In the aftermath, he could have actually owned that. He could have said, you know what? I responded poorly there. I wish I had responded this way instead.
Right.
If he had done that, I would see him in a completely different light. And that's what repair looks like. Repair looks like saying, I came at that completely wrong. Here's how I wish I had done it. And and if you're willing to check me on this, I would be happy to take that feedback in. If you're, like when you're a leader and your people are receiving you in a reactive state, if you've actually built trust with them, they'll actually say, hey, can you try that? Can you take 2 on that one?
Yes. Yeah.
And you'll be like, whoa. So again, I go back to when you end up in a too reactive state, if you've built the trust because you've worked on repair, they'll give you that awareness of what happened, and then you'll be able to work on it more and say, ooh, okay, I'm going to take 2 on that. Here's what I actually wanted to say. And then you start building a new pattern, a new habit starts forming. And then you need them to do that a lot less with you.
Right.
And you start getting it the responsible way the first time. And, and it brings you into this place where you can be kind because you can be clear, especially when you're under pressure. Because now you've learned, when, and I see this happen a lot, when people are stressed and when they're feeling threatened, their vague communication feels like a threat to the people receiving it.
Right.
So when we use clear and simple language, it does help everybody breathe again. And I notice that sometimes even saying, you know what, I'm having a bad response here inside, so I'm going to take a moment, okay? And I'm going to get back to you on that. That is probably one of the best ways when you're not clear enough to just simply say, I'm not feeling clear enough to respond here. So I'm going to take a break for a moment, and I'm going to get back to you on that.
And you're actually teaching me how to do it as well. Right.
Yes.
So as you were learning this, you're actually teaching me and allowing me to learn with you. That's the piece. And my wife does this amazingly. She says things like, I don't think you meant it that way. You want to try again? And I'm like, oh yeah.
Yep.
Didn't know I didn't know I had a tone, didn't know, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for calling me out on that. And then that accountability
Mhm.
becomes something totally different.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
and my husband and I were having like a disagreement the other day, and I said to him, and I said, I want to talk to you about this, but I don't think now is the time.
Mhm.
So maybe later. And then a few minutes later, he came back to me and goes, no, I think I can. Let's talk about this. And I'm like, I saw his agitation. I said, I can see you're agitated. Um, I'm not sure this is going to be received well, but if you feel like you can receive
Yeah.
it, okay, let's try.
Yeah.
So I told him so, and he's like, nope, you know what? You're right. Nope.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, nope, nope, I'm getting heated. Let's come back to this later. And, because I gave him a very kind, like I gave him
Right.
that out. And what's funny is that was not us many years ago.
Mhm.
Um, I came from a very reactive family. Everything had to be hashed out until it was bloody and bleeding on the ground.
Yeah.
And that was the only way I learned. That was the only way I knew. So when we would get into arguments, I was like, I want to argue this until one of us gives,
Right.
like, and I'm like, and I knew, logically speaking, I knew that wasn't the right way to go. So I was like, you know what? And he was the one who would tell me, like, I'm not doing this now. And I would get so mad about it. I was like, oh, I want to
Yes.
bash this out. But it's like, no, because you cannot do it in that moment.
Right.
So just giving leaders the opportunity to say, you don't have to react right away. In fact, it's best if you don't, if you can't find your responsive nature.
Mhm.
If you are feeling super reactive and you've taken your breaths and you've tried to walk yourself off that ledge, but you still feel yourself being pulled back to the ledge, maybe it's time to just simply acknowledge, I am on this ledge. Say it out loud.
Right.
This ledge keeps pulling me back. So now is not the time for this. I'm going to come back.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any final thoughts before we head out for the day as we
There's
get early into the weekend?
there's a story, like a really quick story that brings in healthcare and human connection. And a friend of ours shared this with us. She gave me permission, but I'm going to leave out details. She lost her husband to a medical negligence thing, and he spent time in 2 hospitals. And so, as the investigations was starting, this is her words: if Hospital A is found to be responsible, I want you to drop all charges. When I walked in there, they treated me like I was family. They asked me about my kids. They had conversations with me. They hugged me. I felt like family. If it's the other hospital, I want the full extent of the law. Now, that is huge because the only thing that was different, she's given space for this mistakes that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
The only difference is one place made her feel like a human and the other place made her feel like a product on an assembly line.
Hmm.
And that is the ROI, because when we're bringing humanity back into human service industry, it shifts everything. And then we give permission for people to explore, because I think innately we know this is how we operate and we didn't do anything on purpose. We were actually trying to help. Right. And that brings in a totally different understanding of the world that we can live in. And so I will I will leave with that. If we can bring this Ubuntu of I am because we are, of,
Hmm.
supporting one another
Yeah.
through exploration, like, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
And let's ask for help when we need it.
I love that. I love that. And I hope people can take that story and widen the expanse of what Eric just said there, because every service is human based, right? You said human based services, and I truly believe it doesn't matter what product you're developing, what service you're giving, every single thing we do has a human element in it.
Yep.
And therefore, that means humans first, product second, humans first, system second,
Yes.
humans before the creation of the things we create.
Absolutely.
Humans first. Thank you so much, Eric, for your
Thank you.
time. It's been absolutely valuable and wonderful. And I am wishing everybody a healthy and happy weekend ahead. Enjoy it. And I do hope that our conversation today sparked something in you.
Thank you so much.